What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Yammie Noob. I've got all these motorcycles here. All of them have different engines. I'm going to tell you which one is my favorite and why. Stay tuned, it's going to be a good one. So there are a lot of different types of motorcycle engines out there. You got your V4s, you got your inline 4s, you got your triples, you got your singles, you got your parallel twins, all kinds of engines out there for you to pick from. I mean, there are so many different iconic sounds in motorcycling. It can be hard to pick your favorite one, but after about 5 years of riding, I have decided which one is my favorite, and it might actually surprise you. Personally, I have owned two V-twins, an inline 4, a V4, and two singles. And of all those engines, which one is my favorite? It's the single. The single is my favorite engine of basically all kinds, especially for a daily rider. Why? Because they're great, and I'm going to show you why. But before we do, let's talk about some of the things that I like about these engines here and what I don't. Now, before I go too far, remember that you can win these motorcycles right here. That WR250, that's the one that Yammie looped in a parking lot and decided was his now. You can also get yourself a $6,000 cash prize instead of that there WR250, so you can buy whatever motorcycle you want. If you want to get yourself entered to win any of that stuff, click the link down below. Get yourself signed up on YammieNoob.co. Head over to YammieNoobMerch.com, where every dollar you spend is an entry to win. And you can check out the YN Moto store, where you can buy some of that gear over on that table, although not that specific gear. There's gear like it, trust me, it's not going to have our head grease and stuff in there. You can buy yourself new gear. Anyway, you can get all that cool gear and more, like tires and so forth, over on the YN Moto store. Click the link down below and check that out. It's a cool way to get entered to win, because everybody needs to buy stuff for their motorcycle. Why not win a free motorcycle at the same time? So, getting into the Trident Triple right here. The Triple is Yam's favorite engine type. We all know how much he fantasizes about the 675 Triple in his Daytona. But while this does create great torque, a really linear torque curve, it's a complicated engine, right? And the Rebel right here, while it sounds really good, it's just a little bit much for what this application is. I mean, we're talking about a city bike here, right? Couldn't you make yourself a lighter city bike that's a little less complicated and possibly a little bit cheaper, like that motorcycle over there? The single is really the best engine to be used on the street, and it doesn't have to come in this tiny little 250. Let me show you. Now, before you guys start typing your comments down below, oh, what a shock, Spite likes his own motorcycle. Yes, I do like my own motorcycle. Unfortunately, I wanted to bring the Partzilla DRZ out today because that is a really cool looking bike now. But we haven't revealed it in all of its new splendor. Tune in later this week to see the next challenge video with the Partzilla DRZ. There's quite a surprise in that video. Quite a transformation, actually. So be sure to check that one out. But we are out here on my SMCR, which is a 693cc single cylinder engine right there. And best part about it is it's got this little Rockform phone mount on there. You can see that I actually bought this Rockform mount. It did not get sent to me. I bought it because I wanted to test it out, and I absolutely adore using this thing on this motorcycle. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, you can't get a phone mount on a single cylinder engine. It's going to cause the thing to vibrate and, you know, shake your screen camera or your camera stabilizer thing all up, and it's not going to work anymore. I have not had that problem, and I have ridden quite a big distance on this bike with it on the handlebar mount. I'm actually putting it into charge because my phone is dying, and I have a charger on my bike. So if you want to check out Rockform, get yourself one of these nice mounts for yourself, click the link down below and use the code YN25 to get yourself 25% off your order. Remember that Rockform doesn't just make phone mounts. They make phone cases, phone protectors, all sorts of accessories and so forth for your phone. Okay, so the biggest thing that I see people saying when they're talking about whether or not they want to get single cylinder engine, or a motorcycle with a single cylinder engine rather, is that they're worried that it can't do highway speeds, and I have the speeding tickets to prove that it can. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get up to highway speed right here, but these motorcycles are plenty fast. Admittedly, I do have probably one of the fastest street single-cylinder engines out there. Yeah, you can get, you know, 450s that are measured in hours and blah 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 that, you know, are faster, more torquey than this thing is. But for right out of the box street single-cylinder, this is probably the bleeding edge out there. I don't think there's a bigger or faster one out there that isn't a two-stroke. But the reason why I like this is not because it's so fast. It's because of how it delivers the power. Now, I am primarily a street rider. I've gone to the track, I've gone off-road, but I am primarily a street motorcyclist. And the street is a lot of this right here. You know, you really got to think about the kind of riding that you're going to encounter. And for most people, we all like to think that, oh boy, our commute is going to be this, you know, big, long, twisty road with a bunch of corners and big, long straights where we can wind the bike out, but it's really mostly this. It's mostly stop-and-go traffic, and you want something that is going to be perhaps maybe not fun in stop-and-go traffic because it's really hard to have a good time while you're in traffic like this, but you want something that is going to give you power in a nice, easy, usable way. And nothing hits harder than a thumper, guys. You can wind out inline fours, and they might have they might have a big top end rush. You might get a V-twin that, you know, feels like it's nice and torquey. But off the line, I don't think I've felt a snappier engine than a single cylinder. And I believe it's why, you know, all of these supermotos are considered to be not supermotos if they don't have a single in them. And so, just because it's that nice big whack of torque, allow you to do all those big wheelies and stuff. You know, we're actually going to be able to get up to highway speed, and I won't melt because it is actually getting hot here today. Let's see here. Come on, red light. See? Plenty fast. Totally plenty fast. Again, admittedly, mine might be the most spicy street single out there, but it's a really usable, torquey engine that you really don't have to wind out, and that's a big deal for me, is I don't like keeping my motorcycle on the boil. I don't like having to wind and wait for the power. I like the power to just be there, right on tap for me. And aside from a lightweight V-twin, you know, like a Ducati V-twin, I haven't really felt that kind of just wallop of torque right off the ground out of any other engine but a single cylinder. Now, admittedly, they don't make the best noise. I mean, it's okay. I like it, but then again, it's my motorcycle. But I can admit to it not being the most sexy sounding engine. It's a very utilitarian sound. And the reason this one sounds different is because it's a dual spark. It's got 2 spark plugs. I'm not sure why. Seems like one would be fine, but I'm not an engineer. And the thing that I really like, as somebody who does a lot of his own maintenance, is that single cylinders are crazy simple to work on. You know, think about, my previous motorcycle was a VFR 800. It was a V4. Imagine having to do the valves on a V4 street bike. So you got to take all of the plastics off. So that's, you know, you can get pretty good at it, but for me, it took me about 45 minutes to carefully remove all the plastics without breaking those little push pins that you see on all those sport bikes. It took me a long time
to get the plastics off. Then you had to get the airbox out. And then you're looking at the top of a V4 engine, and you have to do the front 2 cylinders. Each one has 4 valves, so that's 8 up front, and then you got 16 in the back that you have to dig out. It's a nightmare, and admittedly, I'm cherry picking. A V4 is probably one of the worst engines to have to sit and do work on because they're so complicated. But even an inline 4, you're talking about 16 valves, sometimes 5 valves if you go back to the older Yamahas, because Yamaha was crazy at one point. Another reason why they're simpler to work on is because with only 1 cylinder, you don't have to worry about timing a bunch of cylinders, making sure they're in time. You don't have to worry about belts and gears and all that crap, making sure that your cylinders are, you know, you only have 1 cylinder that's a top dead center. You get this thing to top dead center, you don't have to worry about it because you're not going to have to move it around to get to the other cylinders to work on them. And because they're so simple to work on, they're cheap to run and maintain. This motorcycle was expensive, I'm not gonna lie. It was like 12 grand. I think 11,799 was the out the door price I got it for. I basically got it for MSRP, and then I traded my VFR in, so I got it a little bit cheaper. But this was still an expensive motorcycle, but it's still a thumper. It's still really cheap to run the maintenance on. If you look at something like the WR250 or the DRZ or the DR650 or the KLR 650 or the KLX SM, the 300, I mean, all of these street singles are basically unkillable. You just need to do the oil on them. And for the WR, the valve check's like 26,000 miles or something like that, maybe 22,000. It's crazy long valve clearances on that bike. And I mean, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want a motorcycle that they can run cheap? And then one thing I don't love to talk about, because it is really boring and really nerdy to me, is fuel economy. But some people care about fuel economy on their motorcycles. I don't, because regardless of whether or not it was the Busa, which was getting 19 miles to the gallon, or, you know, the Honda Rebel, which is getting like 50, 60 miles to the gallon, they're all still motorcycles and they're gonna do better than cars. So I don't care about fuel economy. But if you do care about fuel economy, because there are some folks out there who want to maximize every dollar spent, a single's a great way to do it. Tell you the truth, I actually forgot my wallet today, so I couldn't get gas. I've done 120 miles on this tank, and I needed to get some gas. Don't have my wallet. I'm not gonna exchange human favors for gas. I have my pride. But the thing is Yam had a half gallon of gas in the shop from when we went, I think when we went on a long distance ride somewhere. He had a half gallon of gas basically just sitting around. I threw that in there, and now I know for a fact that regardless of how much gas I have in here, I'm gonna make it home at the end of the day. You know, I could ride for probably about 60 miles today. Not necessarily on that half gallon alone, but on what was in my tank and all of that stuff. And a lot of the thumpers out there, this being an exception to the rule, can run perfectly fine on 87 because they're lower compression engines. Less stress, they're super easy. In fact, my DRZ, the Partzilla DRZ, prefers 87 octane over 93. Even though the Electron carbon there, you know, was set up for that bike, and we told them we're running 93 pump gas. After running the bike with 93 for a while, I switched to 87 just to see what would happen, and sure enough, with 87 in there, it ran better. Now that's, you know, a weird case because the DRZ is an ancient motorcycle. But, I mean, they're lower compression, they run cheaper gas, they run that on that gas longer. The maintenance is so much easier. The bikes themselves tend to be cheaper. You know, think of the other kind of big supermoto out there, the Hypermotard. That's like a $17,000 motorcycle. This is basically, you know, the poor man's hypermotard, I suppose. And it's only got the one cylinder. Now, like Nicolas Cage and fan fiction, nothing is perfect. So this thing is not perfect. The single is not perfect. And some of the flaws in this engine that people bring up are vibration. Single cylinders are incredibly vibrational engines. There's really no getting away from it. When KTM rebuilt this engine in 2019, they updated it from the previous year SMCR. They basically rebuilt the engine from scratch. It's like 98% new, if I remember the brochure correctly. And in there, they put 2 separate balancer shafts to help absorb some of the vibration of the dinner plate sized cylinder that's just going up and down like crazy. And I can tell you, this thing still vibrates quite a bit. You know, there are some points where if I catch myself holding the bars on too tight, my fingers get tingly. There's really no way to get around it. You know, even the DRZ, the KTM 390 Adventure, the Husqvarna that we had, the Svartpillen, the WR, they're all super vibrational engines, and that's just because of the physics of the machine. The reason why V4s and inline 4s are so smooth is because when one piston is going up, the other piston is going down in the opposite direction, and it just makes it a much smoother power plant than a Thumper ever could hope to be. Another thing that people tend to think about Thumper motorcycles generally, and this again is also generally accurate, is that they're kind of ugly motorcycles. And I understand that because they're all based on dual sports at this point. You know, and whenever somebody says single cylinder engine, chances are they're thinking about a dirt bike. And the dirt bike is an acquired taste. If you like the look of a dirt bike, you are in a very thin minority of people, because there's nothing special about the way they look. You put a dirt bike next to an R1 or a Panigale, everybody aside from a absolute dirt bro is going to tell you that the Panigale and the R1 look better. They just are. And I've accepted that, owning 2 single cylinder engines right now. They just all kind of look the same. You know, I've had the KTM for about a year now, and I've come to realize exactly how different this is from the DRZ, but it took me a long time to really figure it out. So if somebody is like, oh, I don't like single cylinders because they're in ugly looking motorcycles, I get it. Now the thing about those ugly motorcycles is that because they only have the one cylinder in a small compact engine, those bikes are all so much lighter. There is no single cylinder engine aside from maybe the KLR. The KLR is kind of heavy, and I guess the DR652. But aside from those, they tend to be under 400 pounds. They're all these really lightweight motorcycles. I mean, this is putting down 75 horsepower at the wheel now because of the stuff that I've done to it. And it weighs 370 pounds. I mean, that's a spicy meatball. If I were capable of doing a wheelie, this thing would basically never be able to keep the front wheel down. And that's a universal truth among basically all single cylinder engines. If you look at the beginner bike offerings from KTM and Husqvarna, they're all these tiny sub 370 pound bikes. And that's awesome. That's a great thing, because a beginner on a heavy bike tends to not work out so well. Oh, and going back to that cheap idea from earlier, that you can get these bikes for cheap, the KTM Duke 390 is like $5,500, and the Husqvarna is $5,000. And they make just as much torque, or they make more torque than a Ninja 400, and they make just as much horsepower. I think the Ninja is about 45, and the Husky is 40 or 44. I can't remember. And they always make power nice and down low where the majority of us are going to use it. You know, obviously if you're at a track, you're probably going to keep it screaming off the top end. But out here on the road, you're not doing that. You're going to, you know, get into a curve just like that and then power out of it. Because that's more fun on a street bike anyway, because you can't hit an apex, you know? You can't do that. I mean, you can, but you're a fool if you do. So let's start summarizing my thoughts, because I feel like this video is starting to get good and long on us here. The reason I think that a single-cylinder engine is so good for the street rider is because they're lighter, they produce almost instant and usable power on the street. They're easier, simpler, and cheaper to maintain. They're cheaper to run because they have better gas mileage. And while they don't produce a great sound, you can get some that sound pretty okay. I mean, admittedly, I do have a really nice exhaust on here, but I think it sounds pretty cool. And some problems with these motors that you're just going to have to learn to deal with if you pick one up is that the bikes they're in often aren't very sexy. They're not good-looking bikes. And they're very vibrational. You can't get around the fact that they're always going to shake on you. Now, if you're out there and you're on, say, an inline 4, you're on your V4, maybe even a parallel twin, and you're like, I think that he's pulling my leg, there's no way that it can be that good, I really urge you to go out and try one out for yourself. And not just, you know, a beginner thumper. Maybe get on a bike like this or a dirt bike that's got crazy snappy torque off the, you know, right off the jump. They come in a lot of shapes and sizes, and I think that a lot of people overlook them because they're just so utilitarian. And they're in bikes that are considered really utilitarian. But man, if I don't whack the throttle open on this thing and it doesn't put a smile on my face. Now remember, if you would like to go get yourself a single-cylinder motorcycle, you can get entered to win down below a nice $6,000 cash prize, or any of our other motorcycles. We've got the ZH2, which your time is running out on, by the way. We've got the Rebel 1100, and we've got the Triumph Trident 660. And the RS 660. I keep forgetting we have that one. So we have a bunch of options up for grabs. A lot of different engine styles out there, even though they're not my particular favorite. You might want to get yourself one of those bikes. You can click the link down below, go to yammynoob.co, go to yammynoobmerch.com, where every dollar you spend is an entry to win. Check out the YN Moto store, where again, every dollar you spend on gear, tools, parts, accessories, whatever we've got on there, you can get yourself entered to win these motorcycles. Don't forget also, while you're down there, get yourself entered to win, to check out Rockform. They sponsored this video. Big shout out to them. I am a huge fan of my Rockform setup on my motorcycle. Absolutely adore it. And I've had a handful of different phone mounting situations. And this one is the one that will be staying on my motorcycle for the rest of the time that I own it. Alrighty guys, I will catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
So real bummer, this video is actually over, but you're in luck. There are hundreds of other Yammie Noob videos you can go and check out. Hit this one right over here. Watch it. Do it for Yammie-chan.